The last thing I remember was grabbing the impact wrench off the bench. Next thing I knew, I was face down on the concrete, my body jerking like a fish out of water. Tools clattered around me, someone shouted my name, and then everything just went black. My name's Rena Bishop. I'm 33 years old and live in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That night, I was on hour 11 of another double shift at the shop, Gerald Hart's shop, because he decided to take a well-deserved 3-week vacation. So I held down the fort, did payroll, dealt with clients, ran diagnostics, ordered parts, ate maybe once a day, and hadn't slept right in a week. I knew I was pushing it, but I didn't think I'd actually go down. Quick note, before we start, how's your day going and where are you joining from? I came to briefly in the ambulance. Everything was spinning. Lights above me, cold air from the vents, sirens screaming in the distance. The paramedic was talking into a radio, saying they'd notified my emergency contact. Then I heard it, his voice, over dispatch. She's replaceable. I'm not covering this. That word, replaceable, cut through the haze like a blade. I started gasping, tried to sit up, but the straps held me down. My chest ached more from that sentence than whatever the hell was happening inside my body. Next thing I knew, I was waking up in a white room with an IV in my arm. The doctor was standing at the end of my bed with a chart in his hand, and that calm, overly rehearsed look they all have when they're about to give you bad news. Severe exhaustion, he said. Your blood pressure was sky high. We almost lost you. I didn't even blink. I just stared at the peeling edge of the monitor beside me. He kept talking. You need 2 weeks off minimum. No work, no stress. You keep pushing like this, and next time you won't wake up. I nodded like I understood, but I didn't. Not really. 2 weeks off? That shop was my whole damn life. I hadn't taken 2 days off in 6 years. Who was going to handle the accounts? Who was going to make sure Gerald's dumbass suppliers didn't overcharge us? Still, I was too weak to argue. My hands were shaking just lifting the cup of water. My chest still burned. But all I could think about was that word, replaceable, and who the hell was he replacing me with? 2 weeks later, I walked back into that shop like nothing had happened. I still felt a little shaky, but I needed to prove I could pull my weight. I was ready to check the weekly orders, maybe catch up on diagnostics, or get under a hood. But as soon as I stepped onto the floor, I froze. Some punk in a snapback was parked in my bay, buffing his shiny red Mustang with the shop rags. My shop rags. He wasn't wearing a uniform, just some gym tank and earbuds. Blasting music like this was his personal garage. I walked up. You lost or just stupid? I snapped. He looked me over with a smirk. Nah. This is my bay now. I didn't answer. I went straight to the crew board to check the roster. My name? Gone. Replaced by Chase Hart. That's when I felt the first crack. I stomped over to the lockers. My combo lock was missing. I popped open the box with a screwdriver I kept stashed behind the rack. Empty, my torque wrenches, sockets, my diagnostic tablet, gone. Even the little photo I had of my niece stuck inside the door, ripped off. Just scratch marks left behind. Rena, someone whispered behind me. It was Mikey, one of the techs I used to mentor. He pulled me behind the stacks, voice low. That's Gerald's kid, he said. He brought him in while you were out. Said he needed someone who wouldn't drop dead in front of a client. My stomach dropped. Where the hell's my office? Mikey didn't say anything, just pointed to the back, toward the parts storage. I marched down the hall, expecting at least a corner desk. Instead, I found a folding table shoved against a dusty wall, surrounded by busted crates and half-empty bins. No computer, no chair, just a clipboard and a stack of old parts receipts. I stormed upstairs. Gerald was in his office, feet up, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. You move my stuff? I asked. He didn't flinch. You collapsed in front of a client. You're a liability. I reassigned you. You mean demoted me. You wiped my name off the board. He leaned back. You were out. I had to keep things running. Chase has more energy, more potential. Potential? I laughed. He was rubbing his Mustang like it owed him money. Gerald set his cup down and stood up, like he wanted to tower over me. You think I'm running a charity? You broke down. That's not my problem. I've got a business to protect. I didn't trust myself to speak, so I turned around and walked back down. My hands were shaking, not from weakness. Rage. Pure, boiling rage. The next few days were hell. I was stuck in the back, sorting spark plugs and oil filters like a trainee. Meanwhile, Chase strutted around the shop like he owned it. He updated the database, which basically meant deleting all the systems I'd spent years building. My client notes, cross-check orders, shipping preferences, trashed. He even took credit for a custom intake system I designed for a performance fleet last year, told everyone it was his build. I kept my mouth shut, for now. But every time I saw him mess something up and laugh it off, or Gerald slap him on the back like he'd just won a medal, I clenched my fists a little tighter. No one said a word about me coming back. No welcome, no glad you're okay. Just silence, like I'd never existed. I'd given that shop my 20s. Built it from the ground up with Gerald, stayed late, caught mistakes that would have cost him 6 figures. And now? I was in a storage room counting washers while his spoiled son took a victory lap. One afternoon, I caught Chase scrolling through my old client files on the office computer, pretending to follow up. He looked up at me like I was the janitor. "You can go back to counting screws or whatever," he said. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stared at him, long enough to make him uncomfortable. He rolled his eyes and turned back to the screen. That was the moment I knew. They weren't just replacing me. They were trying to erase me, and they were going to regret it. The next morning, I was knee-deep in a bin of mismatched brake pads when I heard someone yelling up front, "Where's Rena? She always handled this for me." I paused. That voice, I knew it. Mr. Bledsoe ran a fleet of lawn trucks, came in like clockwork every month. Chase popped off loud and annoyed. "She's not here anymore, all right? We upgraded the system." 5 minutes later, the guy stomped past me on the way out, muttering, "This place is gone to hell." That was just the beginning. Every day, more regulars were pissed. Wrong parts, missing appointments, invoices that made no sense. And every single time, I heard the same excuse. "It's the old system's fault." That meant me. Quick note, while you're listening, tell us which country you're watching from. I kept my mouth shut, but it was eating at me. One of the front desk girls, Carla, started sneaking me leftover lunch from the break room. She'd find me in the back, hand me a sandwich or a thermos of soup like I was some stray dog. "Gerald's been coming in at 6 lately," she whispered one day, glancing over her shoulder. "Before anyone else, he's locking his office now." I didn't respond, but that stuck in my head. 2 days later, I was checking through a shipment of engine mounts when something didn't add up. A line item on the inventory sheet said we'd received 4 diesel engines. Expensive ones, but I'd just opened every crate. Only 2 were there. I double-checked the bill. Signed off, Gerald Hart, his name, right there next to the word "received in full." That didn't sit right. I started digging, quietly. Over the next few nights, I stayed late under the excuse of organizing inventory logs. I dug through shipping slips, scanned barcodes, checked order histories on our supplier portal. The deeper I went, the more crap I found. Brake kits, gone. 2 full boxes of catalytic converters, vanished. A transmission order logged as delivered, but nowhere on the floor. All signed by Gerald. Always his signature, never Chase's. This wasn't some sloppy paperwork issue. Stuff was disappearing. Expensive stuff. Then came the phone call. I was behind the shelving wall that separated the parts room from Gerald's office when I heard Chase's voice. He was pacing just outside, phone to his ear. "No, just a few more weeks. Yeah, Dad's selling soon. Once the audit clears, we're golden. Just keep quiet." I didn't breathe. I just stood there, back against the wall, fists clenched. Selling? Audit? And I was down here counting spark plugs like an idiot. That night, I pulled up the shop's bookkeeping software on the ancient terminal in the back. I still had partial access, probably an oversight. I compared inventory receipts with shipment invoices from the last year. Everything looked normal on paper, until I looked closer. There was a pattern. Gerald was logging phantom deliveries, stuff that never made it to the shop floor. High-ticket parts, whole engine blocks, brand new lifts, all marked received, with no signatures from the delivery drivers, no matching crate scans, no serial logs. Just clean paper trails leading nowhere. I copied everything. Screenshots, PDFs, even old paper receipts tucked into filing bins that Chase hadn't shredded yet. I took pictures with my phone, backed it all up to a drive I wore around my neck like a cross. It all clicked at once. They weren't just running me out. They were covering their tracks. Chase wasn't some screw-up. He was the fall guy in training. Gerald was setting him up to take the shop over, fake clean, so they could cash out before anyone noticed the holes. And I was supposed to be the loose thread they cut. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of it all. I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I just started planning. They wanted to loot the place and walk off like nothing happened, not if I had anything to say about it. I sat on the floor of my apartment, back against the couch, surrounded by stacks of binders and old catalogs. Each one had tabs, notes in the margins, part numbers circled with highlighter, years of builds, custom orders, loyalty discounts I negotiated by hand. They look like junk now. My phone hadn't buzzed in days. Gerald had changed the shop's contact number. The client email I built, reassigned to team support. They scrubbed me out like a typo. I'd skipped every birthday, every vacation, even stayed late the night my sister went into labor. And for what? So Gerald could hand my life's work to his lazy-ass son and pretend I never existed? I didn't sob. I didn't even sniffle. I raged. Tears burned hot, rolling down my cheeks, but my body stayed still. I stared at the wall while my fists clenched against the carpet. They weren't just screwing me over. They were erasing me. The next morning, I dragged myself in early. It was demo day, the annual parts vendor event I'd organized every year like clockwork. Gerald was standing by the loading dock with a clipboard. "You'll handle hauling boxes," he said, not even looking at me. "Stay out of the main room." "No table setup?" I asked, dry. He glanced at me. "We've got it covered." I was banned from the very event I'd spent 5 years perfecting. So I hauled boxes. I stacked vendor kits and folding chairs, ran extension cords, ate a vending machine granola bar while Chase strutted around in a button-down shirt 2 sizes too small, trying to remember which brake systems we actually offered. Then I heard them upstairs. I'd snuck near the vent just outside the main floor. Gerald had cleared the second-floor meeting room for a $150,000 pitch. The client, one of our biggest regional accounts, was asking about service intervals, order history, the timeline for expansion. Chase froze. He stammered through half an answer, mixed up product names, and even called our high-margin diesel kits the shiny ones. Dead silence followed. Then a polite but cold, "Thanks for your time." Footsteps. Door slammed. Chase cursed. Gerald shouted something about, "Not blowing this." I heard a thud, maybe a fist on a table. I smiled. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Because that was the moment I snapped. No more tears. No more hiding in the parts room. No more watching from the shadows while those 2 idiots destroyed what I built. They thought I was gone, that they'd pushed me into some dark corner where I'd stay quiet and disappear. They didn't understand who they were dealing with. I'd rebuilt that shop 3 times after vendor failures, rewrote our client tracking by hand when the first software crashed, and saved Gerald's ass when he almost lost his license over bad inventory logs. And now they wanted to toss me out like scrap? Fine. Let them think they'd won. Let them think I was broken. That was the moment I decided to burn their little empire to the damn ground. The next morning, I walked straight into Gerald's office like I belonged there. He looked up from his desk, clearly surprised. "You need something?" I kept my tone calm. "I want to help train Chase, get him up to speed." He blinked. "Really? Really?" I said, and smiled. If he's taking over, he should do it right. Gerald leaned back, smirked like he'd just won a game I didn't know we were playing. "Glad to see you're finally on board." Chase walked in a minute later, bouncing on his heels like a kid. "So what? I'm the boss and you're my assistant now?" I looked at him dead in the eye. "Let's just get you trained." They bought it. For the next 3 weeks, I became his shadow, smiling, helpful, patient. On the outside, I looked like I was handing him the keys. In reality, I was building a bomb. I started by creating training materials, PowerPoints and cheat sheets loaded with client info, service tiers, part compatibility, all the stuff I used to keep in my head. Chase didn't question it. He thought it made him look legit. What he didn't know was every document was a copy of my original work, watermarked with timestamps. I was building my case, line by line. I introduced him to clients, only the ones I trusted. I stood by while he said dumb crap like, "We don't really do those anymore," or tried to upsell someone on something they'd already rejected last year. Then, quietly, I followed up behind him and fixed it. I told the clients I was just smoothing out his learning curve. Most of them saw through it, but they played along. Every time Chase made a mess, I made a note. Meanwhile, I kept digging. During inventory tours, I walked him through the floor and explained where we stored everything. While he nodded like a bobblehead, I was scanning missing stock numbers and logging which shelves hadn't seen new parts in months. I kept a journal, documented it all. Took photos, copied shipping logs, and saved every forged delivery signature Gerald had filed. I backed it all up, twice. Then I got sneaky. I scheduled Chase with double-booked meetings, 2 clients at once, different topics. I'd say things like, "Don't worry, you've got this," while slipping out the door to go meet with vendors behind the scenes. He flailed, got chewed out, misquoted pricing, forgot deadlines, blamed the transition. I just kept smiling. I even set up a mock presentation for him one Friday, said it was a practice run for the upcoming expo. He showed up unprepared, mumbled through 10 minutes of nonsense, and ended it by saying, "We're basically the Amazon of auto repair." I almost choked trying not to laugh. At the same time, I reconnected with our top 20 clients. I didn't make it obvious. I called under the excuse of checking in, asked how service had been, whether they needed anything flagged before the expo. Most were polite, but I could hear the irritation in their voices. One guy flat out said, "It's been a clown show since you left." Behind the curtain, the shop was rotting, slow and quiet like mold. Chase was too arrogant to notice. Gerald was too distracted counting the dollars he thought were coming. I saw the cracks spreading fast, orders delayed, vendors unpaid, clients ghosting emails. Some staff were starting to murmur. Carla pulled me aside one day and whispered, "You're the only reason this place hasn't imploded yet." I didn't tell her what I was doing. I just nodded and got back to training. One night, I stayed late, said I needed to finish restocking the brake line bins. In reality, I was finalizing a client directory: names, orders, preferences, margins, my clients, my relationships. Gerald had tried to take them. I was taking them back. I wasn't just gathering proof, I was reclaiming what was mine. By the end of the third week, Chase was drowning in meetings, couldn't remember where he saved files, and was missing shipments because he didn't know we had to confirm delivery. I just kept handing him more fake responsibility, more weight, more rope, and he was doing exactly what I expected. He was hanging himself. The morning of the Regional Auto Expo, I left my house with 2 rolling crates, a folded table, and a clean slate. Inside those crates, everything I'd built. The real client slides, the branded folders I designed, data sheets, system maps, maintenance timelines. My work, all updated, all clean. Not a single file with Gerald's name on it. Gerald and Chase thought they were walking into a gold mine. They had a bare-bones booth near the front, barely enough printouts to fill a clipboard. They expected me to be there, gritting my teeth behind the scenes like always. I wasn't. Instead, I checked in at a small conference room I'd booked under a new name, Werner Automotive Systems. No bells, no banners, just a simple sign and a digital projector. I set up everything myself, rolled out my custom table runner, arranged the folders, double-checked the tech, and waited. While I did, I peeked into the main hall. Their booth looked like a garage sale. Gerald stood stiff in an ill-fitting blazer, nodding like a politician. Chase leaned on the counter like it was a bar and barked "bro" at the wrong people. I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Then came the main floor pitch, one of the expo's spotlight sessions. This was supposed to be their moment. I'd secured it months ago under our shop's name. They never canceled it. They assumed I would run it. I didn't. Gerald walked up to the mic with a cheap slideshow and zero prep. Chase stood behind him, grinning like a golden retriever in a tie. The first slide came up, low-res photos, typos, wrong pricing tiers. Gerald mumbled some half-formed sentences about innovation and commitment. Chase jumped in, tried to pitch a commercial service package, and got the product names wrong. Twice. Dead air. Then came the questions. Real ones. Tough ones. From seasoned fleet directors, restoration pros, even a custom shop mechanic who built cars for TV. Where's your data tracking? Why did our service pause in April? Why is the invoice process broken? Where's Rena Bishop? Gerald's face dropped. Chase tried to fake a cough and muttered something about transitions. Nobody was buying it. Then one of the bigger clients, guy named Rob from a freight company in Kansas, stood up and asked flat out, "Is this the same shop that screwed up our last build and ghosted our calls?" Silence. Someone from the back added, "Where's the woman who used to run things?" "She knew her stuff," Gerald stammered. "She's no longer with the company." "Well, that explains a lot," Rob muttered, loud enough for the room to hear. And just like that, it unraveled. I didn't stick around for the rest. I had my own room to run. Back in my private space, the top 20 clients I'd contacted walked in, one by one, right on time. I handed out binders, pulled up my slides, laid out my restructured service model under the Werner name. No fluff, no garbage. just results. I watched their eyes light up as they flipped through real schedules, real upgrades, real value. "This is clean," one said. "I've been waiting for someone to do this right," said another. I took them through every layer of the rebuild: centralized service logs, predictive parts management, fleet customization. Not just auto repair, systems. By the end of that hour, I had handshakes, verbal commitments, follow-up meetings booked. Not pity, not sympathy, respect. Someone asked me what Werner stood for. I just smiled. Middle name, it's mine. Thought it deserved a second chance. I saw it click for a few of them. They didn't ask questions. They just signed on. As I packed up that evening, I walked past Gerald's booth again. It was mostly empty. Gerald sat alone, rubbing his temples. Chase was nowhere to be seen. Someone walked past me and said, "You're the only reason that place used to run." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because the ones who mattered, they were already walking with me. I was halfway to the expo exit, rolling my crates behind me, when I heard my name. "Rena!" I didn't even turn. I knew that voice. The fake concern layered under panic. Heavy footsteps followed. Gerald caught up and stepped in front of me, blocking the door. "Where's the presentation?" he snapped. "Where are the custom builds? Those were for us." I let go of the crate handle and looked him dead in the eye. "They were mine, Gerald, and I quit." His mouth opened, then closed like he'd short-circuited. "You can't just walk away with everything." "Everything I built, I backed up. Designed. Owned. You never filed a single trademark. Never signed any IP contracts. You treated me like an assistant, remember?" He scoffed. "We'll sue." I smiled. "Try it." I pulled a manila folder from my shoulder bag and handed it to him. "Here, enjoy your exhibit." He flipped it open. His face changed by page 2. He went ghost white by page 5. Inside were scanned invoices, inventory logs, delivery slips, everything I'd copied over the last month. Every forged signature, every part that was logged but never received. "Where did you get this?" "I worked there, Gerald. Remember? Before you buried me in the back." His fingers tightened around the folder. "This isn't what you think." Chase stormed up behind him, red in the face. "You backstabbing little—" Gerald threw an arm out to stop him. "Not here." "Oh, we're doing this now," Chase growled, stepping toward me. I didn't move. "Don't!" Gerald barked, grabbing his arm. "Just don't." The pause was long, heavy. I could see it in Gerald's eyes. He wasn't calculating anymore. He was panicking. For the first time, he understood he wasn't holding the cards. "Let's talk this out," he said, quieter now. "We can make this work. Don't do something stupid." I raised an eyebrow. "I already have other meetings scheduled." And right on cue, our top client, Rob, the freight guy from Kansas, stepped up next to me. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. Gerald looked at him, then back at me, like he just now noticed the ground was cracking beneath him. "You don't want to burn bridges, Rena." I grabbed my crate handle. "I didn't burn it. You let it rot." Then I walked, past the booths, past the vendors, past the small crowd that had seen enough to know what just happened. I didn't look back, but I knew Gerald was still standing there, holding a folder full of his own downfall. By the time I got home that night, I was running on fumes, but I didn't stop. I pulled out my old notebook and started listing contacts: vendors, mechanics, fleet managers, everyone I'd worked with directly before Gerald shoved me in a closet. Then I made the calls. One by one, I reached out. Clean slate, new brand. Same Rena. Most didn't even hesitate. "We've been waiting," one of them said. "Gerald's whole place went sideways the minute you were gone." I didn't gloat. I just sent over my terms and followed through. Within a week, I had 2 supplier contracts in place. Parts started arriving at my apartment. I used a friend's garage to store overflow. Nothing fancy yet, but it worked. Orders were moving. Clients were booking. Then the cease and desist letter showed up in my mailbox. Thick envelope, legal header, accusations of intellectual theft, client poaching, unauthorized use of materials. I laughed out loud. I scanned the whole thing, attached my file labeled Fraud Evidence Master, and emailed it to the lawyer who sent it, with one line: "Review attached documents. Let me know if you'd like to add insurance fraud to your claim." That was the last I heard of that. A few days later, I got a text from a mechanic I used to work with. Chase just got his ass handed to him. Apparently, he'd botched a major garage build for a commercial chain. One of my builds, the kind with zero margin for error. He installed the wrong lifts, ordered parts that didn't fit, and blamed the techs when nothing worked. The site lead screamed at him in front of a full crew. He walked off the job. By the next morning, he'd quit the shop. Then the calls started. One by one, clients I hadn't heard from in months reached out. Some I thought I'd lost forever. All of them said the same thing. We want you, not them. A few admitted they'd waited to see how the expo went. Now that the dust had cleared, they were ready to switch over. One even said, "You made that place work." We just didn't see it until it fell apart. I kept the momentum rolling. Every day I updated pricing, cleaned up client lists, tightened response times. Nothing flashy, just solid, consistent execution. That's all these people ever wanted. Then, one morning, I opened my laptop to a flagged headline. Insurance audit hits Tulsa auto chain. I clicked. There it was. Gerald's shop. Under investigation. I didn't need to wonder who sent the files. I already knew. I'd mailed them out anonymously 2 weeks earlier. Full packet, print copies, USB drive, inventory logs, fraud summaries. No signature, just truth. From there, the fall was quick. Vendors stopped responding to Gerald. Clients canceled appointments. Mechanics quit. Carla messaged me. "It's a ghost town here." Then the sign came down. Gerald listed the shop for sale. The online post was dry and desperate. Turnkey operation, established client base. That was a lie. There was nothing turnkey left. No staff, no customers, no systems. Just oil-stained concrete and echoing silence. He tried to repaint it, rebrand, even offered consulting hours for transition help. No one bought it. I watched from a distance. I didn't reach out. I didn't rub it in. I didn't have to. He'd built his kingdom on my back, and when he kicked me out, it collapsed under its own weight. Good. 2 months later, I opened the front door to my own office, Werner Auto Solutions. Clean logo on the glass, matte black sign out front. Nothing flashy, but solid. Real. Mine. My old assistant, Tasha, sat at the front desk. She looked up and grinned. 10 minutes early. Must be serious today. "Every day's serious now," I said, and dropped my bag by my desk. She was my right hand now. Knew the business better than most managers. The minute she saw Gerald's place go under, she called me. Said she was done babysitting idiots and wanted in. I didn't even hesitate. The first week, we were swamped. Clients came out of the woodwork. Even ones I hadn't spoken to in years tracked me down. "You should have left sooner," they kept saying. "You were always the brains behind it. Thank God you're back." They weren't wrong. I had no shop floor yet. Just a couple contractor garages I rented out. But everything was running smoother than it ever had under Gerald. One rainy afternoon, I was going over a service proposal when the door creaked open. Gerald. Dripping wet, soaked through his coat. His hair was thinner, his eyes hollow. He stepped in like he wasn't sure he belonged. I stood up, didn't say a word. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope. "You won," he said quietly. "The shop closes next week." He set the envelope on the front counter. "I came across this while cleaning. Figured it should go to you." Then he left. No speech, no apology, just silence and the sound of the door clicking shut behind him. I opened the envelope. Inside was a faded photo. Me and him, arms crossed in front of the shop on grand reopening day, back when things still felt possible. On the back, scribbled in marker, "Couldn't have done it without you." I read it twice. Too little, too late, I thought, and slid it into the drawer without a word. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel sorry for him either. He built a business on my back, then tried to cut me loose. I didn't just survive it. I rebuilt better. My phone buzzed. New message. One of my biggest fleet clients. "Layout looks perfect. Clean, efficient, just like old times." I smiled. Gerald once said I was replaceable. Truth was, I was the only one who wasn't.